Welcome to this presentation on the new IAFOA mechanics. This is the 18th edition of the Manual of Football Officiating. I'm Jim Briggs. I'm both the chairman of the International American Football Officials Association and I'm chairman of the BAFRA Rules and Mechanics Committee. So just to give you a bit of background about the new MOFO, we published the new 18th edition just before Christmas. And if you've got the PDF version of it, you'll see that the changes that from the previous edition are all marked in blue text. If you've got a printed version, then hopefully the text will appear in a slightly lighter shade of grey. I counted all the changes up and there are 486. I'm not going to talk about them all, don't worry. But the major changes have a box around them, so they stand out even more. There are 47 of those, and so this presentation is going to cover those. Just a reminder that nearly all the changes have a little symbol after them that describes why the change was made. So if you go double dagger, that's because CFO changed something or we've changed something to bring us into line with CFO. Single dagger means we've changed it because we think we can improve the coverage. Often there's a gap in an existing mechanic where someone comes up with a situation that isn't quite covered by the mechanic. So the funny squiggly symbol indicates where we've tried to plug that gap. If we've otherwise clarified or enhanced an existing mechanic, then you'll see a diamond signal. And then the @ symbol is used for the changes that are for better communication. Now, in the last edition of the Mechanics Manual, we introduced a new notation for crew sizes. Things like 2x3 and 3xx, things like that. That, we realised, didn't quite work for free kick plays, where really on a free kick, the only thing that's important is how many officials on the crew. So now we've got a notation for free kick plays where the letter F is followed by a number, and that just represents the number of officials on the crew. So in the sections of the various positional chapters that refer to free kicks, you'll see that notation used instead. So we're going to do this in parts, and part one is covering a number of changes that we've made to penalty administration. We've really had a major go at Chapter 19. It's one that we haven't looked at in detail for a while, so we've hopefully made a number of significant improvements to it. The first is about better communication, and that's partly better communication within the crew. And the most important part of that is that we're now making it mandatory that if you have radios, you should use the radio to report your foul. That way, everybody on the crew, plus a video judge and anybody else off the field who's listening, they all know what you've called. And we really, really want to stress this, that this is important. This is probably the most useful part of radio technology that we can take advantage of. And we think that by letting everybody know what the foul is, at the earliest possible point in the process, then that makes the officiating of the game so much easier. It enables everybody on the crew to be on the same page, and if you've got everybody on the same page, that considerably reduces the chances that you'll get something wrong. The second thing we want to emphasize, this has always been the mechanic, but people don't always do it. If you're the coverer, if you're the official who's covering the dead ball spot, you're the person who's thrown the penalty flag, don't leave the dead ball spot unless some other official comes over and relieves you of it. This is very important. The enforcement of the penalty isn't always what you expect it will be, and we want people very much to be in the habit of staying at the dead ball spot. If necessary, make the referee come to you, but of course, if you've got a radio, that shouldn't be necessary. The other aspect of communication is we want to improve communication with the captain and the coach about their options. Now, when we talk about better communication, we sometimes mean no communication, because if the enforcement is obvious, you don't need to ask them whether they want to accept the penalty or decline it. You can tell. It's obvious. Now, one time in 1,000, they'll disagree with you, but that we can deal with. But in the normal run of things, if the penalty enforcement is obvious, then just get on and do it. But in the times when we do need to ask an option, we can take a double approach to it. The wing officials can tell the coaches what the situation is and ask them for a choice. And the referee, with the umpire, can talk to the captain. And we want to encourage the ability of the captain and the coach to communicate with each other. But that doesn't mean that the captain can go over to the sideline for a conference about it. The captain can shout to the coach, or the coach can shout to the captain, or they can wave their arms to each other. But at the end of the day, we want to go with the coach's choice if it's known. If the captain has made a choice and the coach overrules him, then we want to go with the coach's choice. That's a bit of a change. The philosophy when I started officiating was very much that the captain's choice was final. Now we're moving to a situation where the technology and the game have advanced to the stage where this is now the coach's decision. Of course, the coach's decision could be communicated in from the wing officials, so it doesn't have to be signalled into the captain. Let's just find out what it is and then get on with it. Now, we've revamped the section on penalty enforcement that deals with how we check that we haven't made a mistake. So we've retermed this error prevention. First point on this is to say it doesn't matter if you've got a centre judge. It doesn't matter if it's done by the umpire or the centre judge. The only exception to that is that if the enforcement is from the spot of a free kick, then the umpire does it because the umpire manages the kicker on free kicks. But anyway, what should the process be for the umpire or the centre judge who's marching the penalty off? Well, we want them to check with either or both the head linesman and the line judge that they're starting off from the correct enforcement spot. And when they've finished, when they've got to the succeeding spot, we want them to check with the head linesman or the line judge that they've gone the correct direction and the correct distance. We're not saying that this needs to be done in synchrony. Too many crews, the umpire has got to the enforcement spot and then they've waited 5-10 seconds before the linesman was in a position to march with them, and then they've gone step for step in process. Well, we don't think it looks very good. It takes too long. The idea is that we check where we're starting from, but that check could be verbal, it could be done by pointing, it doesn't have to be done by two people standing parallel with each other. And again, we want to check where we finish, but again, that could be verbal or by pointing. It doesn't have to be people standing immediately in the right place. The other tip is we want the umpire or centre judge to keep the ball in hand and only place it on the ground when it's finished and everything's checked. That way you're not putting the ball down to think about where the penalty enforcement spot is. You're not putting the ball down to think about whether you're in the right place. Put the ball on the ground once when everything's finished. And incidentally, that is then the time for the umpire or centre judge to write the penalty down after they've finished stepping it off. Another point about is that there's no real need for officials to, if it's a 5-yard penalty, to take 5 steps. What we would much rather people do is say, right, we're starting on the 39-yard line, we're going back to the 34, and then just go to the 34. There's no need to take 5 steps to get you there, just go to the 34-yard line. It's much quicker, much simpler, and the verbal confirmation of what the yard line is a much more effective way of doing these things. So I've already stressed there's no need for the linesman and the line judge to synchronise with the umpire and centre judge. The other step of the process is for the linesman not to move the down box until the enforcement is confirmed as correct. So up to that point, we can still go back to the previous spot if that's necessary, for whatever reason. This is all covered in Chapter 19, Section 3. Then a few other things about penalty administration. A couple of things about the referee's announcements. We want to emphasise that where there's an unsportsmanlike conduct foul against an individual, the referee should say words to the effect, this is number 73's first unsportsmanlike conduct foul, just to emphasise that they're on a final warning and another similar foul will get them disqualified. And then in the mechanics manual, we've had for a long time some recommended wording that you should use when you're informing the coach that one of his players has been disqualified. Things about the player having disqualified himself rather than we've disqualified him. So what we're saying is use that same sort of wording in the referee's announcement. So number 34 has disqualified himself for targeting. Words to that effect. The next thing is, this has always been in the mechanics manual, but we're just emphasising it, that the umpire should repeat the signals to the press box before moving the ball when enforcement is on the free kick. And we've added a couple of extra cases where enforcement should be regarded as not obvious. So there are 2 situations where the last team in possession can decline offsetting fouls and have their own foul accepted. One of those is the clean hands rule. The other is with post-scrimmage kick enforcement. So those aren't obvious. Those should normally be conveyed to the coach for an option. And then situations, some teams, if there's a foul that, if there's a penalty, that causes the try to be repeated, they don't actually want the ball to be moved. So they do have the option to decline the distance portion of the penalty in order that the kicker can kick the ball from his usual spot.